This acknowledgement asks us each to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us here together today. AMC is dedicated to an environment in which all individuals are treated with respect and dignity at our programs. Each individual has the right to be in a professional atmosphere that prohibits discriminatory practices, including harassment. Our full code of conduct, policy for today's program, and all our programs, events, and overall work, as well as the outlets to make a direct or anonymous report of a violation, has been posted in our chat feature. We are grateful to our attendees for making space in their schedule to join us. I also want to acknowledge and welcome all our members here today and express our gratitude to them for being part of our community. We give thanks to our speakers for sharing their experiences and knowledge in today's candid and open forum. Please also be sure to check out our YouTube channel to see recordings of past programs as well. Thank you again for joining us. And now to begin.
Good morning from a rainy Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Welcome to today's program. My name is D.S. Kinsel, and I'm happy to be here with everyone. I'm the co-founder of Boom Concepts. We are an arts-based organization here in Pittsburgh, dedicated to the advancement of Black, Brown, queer, and femme artists and cultural entrepreneurs. I'm going to give my roundtable here a quick introduction, but for various technical difficulties, I am going to go off camera. Is that okay with everyone? Great. So we are joined today with some amazing curators and cultural practitioners from across the globe. First, we have Marinella Mina, Associate Curator, Manager for Research and Publications at Ayala Museum. We have Ariel Plotek, Curator of Fine Art at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. Ilva Rouse, Senior Curator, Museum of Contemporary Art in Jacksonville. And my good friend and colleague, Kat Dunn, PhD researcher, DJ, CAD. Kat, I'm going to need you to explain what that means for me. We're going to break that down. At the University of Dundee, Scotland. We also have Emily Klein, co-founder of the collective Rewilding. Now, we all share a collective experience. We're going to be talking about this collective experience, which was the 2021 Engagement Program for International Curators, or EPIC. We all know collaboration can bring about or result, hopefully, in large-scale projects, knowledge sharing, and entry into new markets. Also, professional growth, especially when we have to do that virtually. Now, due to the effects of the global pandemic, the 2021 EPIC program held by AAMC was held entirely digitally. Today, myself and our colleagues will discuss the successes and challenges around this program. Now, before we get into kind of the nuts and bolts, I want to pass it around to everybody to give themselves a lighter introduction, as I, gave some of their what I like to call artsy fartsy or more professional pieces of their being. I'm gonna pass the Kat first.
DJ Kat actually is Duncan of Jordanson College of Art and Design. It's under the University of Dundee in Dundee, Scotland. Hi everyone, I'm Kat Dunn. I am a curator specializing in social justice, and as Darryl said, I'm also a PhD researcher.
Hi, should I just jump in? Continue. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm super happy that we all get to see each other. I'm currently coming to you from Venice, where it's raining even though it's Biennale opening. So everybody's hiding out inside, and it's wonderful because that means I don't feel like I'm missing the sunshine by joining this. And I currently work on the intersection of environmental and cultural problematics through preservation, and I'm really happy to be in conversation with everybody today.
Let's see, I can take over. So hello, everyone. Also happy to be here in this very international gathering. I'm with you from Madrid, Spain. I'm actually visiting. This is where where I started my professional career, and then I went over to New Orleans to start the arts triennial there, Prospect New Orleans, which I ended up being with and directing the last one, Prospect 4. Well, we just celebrated Prospect 5, which I had the great joy to attend just as a visitor, which was a great experience for me, in spite of all the difficulties with the pandemic and all the storms and everything else that all our environmental difficulties that we're living today globally. Yeah, and that about sums it up. I've been in at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Jacksonville, Florida for now 3 years. So I just got there right before the pandemic into isolation. But now I'm looking forward to going back to a more normal life. Over to you, Tenten.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm based in Manila, so I guess I'm a few hours off from everyone else, but I'm very happy to be joining everyone this evening for this very interesting discussion. I guess just a lighthearted introduction to myself. My area of focus is really in tradeware ceramics, but I actually started my career in the museum with an interest in video art, but now in my spare time, I focus on my family of 6 cats. And I guess I'll pass it on to Ariel from here.
Thank you. I'm Ariel Plotek, and as Dia said, I'm in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'm actually, though, Canadian from Montreal, and I was paired with Tara Hogue at the Remind Modern in Saskatoon. So it was sort of fun that the two of us got to work together as fellow Canadians.
Cool. Thank you, everyone, for sharing a little bit. Ready to jump in it. So, when we all applied to this program, I can't even remember like what year it was at this point almost. But it was kind of before we were in full-blown pandemic mode, or even we're realizing, what could or what could not be around travel. So, what were your expectations of the program, and what was exchanged? Just give us a little bit of your experiences.
First. So yeah, for me, my experiences, I was hoping that I would meet colleagues first and foremost who I could have comfortable and uncomfortable discourses with. In Scotland, social justice art is not really seen as a thing, and especially as a freelancer, you're not particularly welcomed into museums and art galleries because the subjects that I deal with are very political, or seen as very political, very exotic, whatever. And so the work that I tend to work collaboratively with museums and art galleries and other institutions outside of Scotland. And so I really wanted to connect to people, like-minded people, and also kind of open up my network a little bit so that obviously I could potentially do collaborations. I like to work very collaboratively, and you want to kind of keep that kind of ball rolling. I was lucky enough to be paired with DS, and we pretty much got all like houses on fire and then proceeded to rip things apart and put them back together. So for me, I think it was a really great program because even though we had to work internationally, Pittsburgh to Glasgow, with everything that time zones threw into it, I think it was really good because we had those conversations. We continue to have those conversations, and we're still trying to fight the system to figure out how to do stuff together. So yeah, for me, it kind of very much worked with what I had envisioned it would be.
Yeah, and I love to add, at the time I was planning on curating a performance art, being a curator in a performance art festival, kind of like a Fringe festival in the UK. So I was really excited beforehand because I thought, I'd be able to go to that festival, do some of my work, connect with you in person. But, I think it was great because we were able to really utilize, even though there's such a time difference, we were able to utilize technology, Zoom, social media was some ways that we kept up and exchanging partners. So, I was really gracious to be connected with you. And especially because, as a founder of an organization and how we're operating here in Pittsburgh at Boom Concepts, and, in your practice in the space of academia, I thought it was very complimentary. So, I want to give a big ups to AMC. Want to pass it over to Ariel. Maybe you want to talk about some of your expectations of the program going in and some of the things that you exchange with your partner.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I had taken for granted, I suppose, in my now, I guess, but more, a dozen years or so, working in the field, that this was a profession that just naturally involved a lot of travel, and so it seemed perfectly normal to be working with someone, that was in a way that was going to require us to sort of to make that effort to be to work together in person, and I think that I've just altogether in the last couple of years have been sort of reconsidering that expectation, that sort of idea that somehow an essential part of my job is to be getting on an airplane as often as I used to before the pandemic. And what I found to be the result in this partnership with Tara was really that I think the time we spent on Zoom and oftentimes just phone calls was probably far more than we would have done if we'd been sort of, if we'd had the idea that we needed to be face to face to have kind of meaningful interactions. And so as a result, there was actually, I think, not only more time, but in some ways a kind of greater, it was more, we became more familiar with one another. And so it managed in a funny way, I think, to actually sort of deepen our relationship, even though, neither one of us got to visit the other's institution. And it was a little like having a pen pal, but I think, that can actually be a very meaningful relationship.
Cool. I want to give space for sharing kind of what was missing also. It was very challenging. I'm here in the morning. We have folks here at night. So, can folks maybe share a little bit about what was missing from the in-person partnership, that the program historically offered?
Yeah, maybe, one of the strongest reasons I applied is that I lived in the US for a while, upstate New York, Kansas City, random spaces. And then once the pandemic hit, the travel ban was immediately, put into place. And I thought for the first month that it would be a month, and then it turned out to be a little over 2 years. And I think when I applied, I still had this intention of, oh, great, through the AMC, I still get to be part of a conversation, even though I won't physically be there, I'll be in exchange with an American colleague. And then it became clear that the travel ban was continued quite long, honestly, in comparison to other countries. And it was on the one hand wonderful because, sort of mirroring what Ariel said, you made this intentional time to talk with somebody. Like, it had this very much sort of meditative quality of talking to somebody on a regular basis without a clear agenda. But on the other hand, I think some that was missing is sort of this easiness of exchange that you have in person. not to glorify drinking, but when you have a nice glass of wine after going to a gallery together and having this input of looking at things together and sort of pinpointing what you've seen, and sort of this easy exchange is very hard to do in the vacuum of online, when you don't look at something, or when you don't move through a street and sit in a cafe and have these very tactile experiences together. So I think even though I've been so incredibly lucky to have been paired with Melissa Messina, who's been wonderful, wonderful, I think it would have been so great to have that on top of sort of a more non-bodied exchange online.
Yeah, and then this is Silva. I had this similar experience to Marinelle. I think she'll echo me that so I was paired with Duka from the Sana Sabar Museum, Fine Arts Museum in Mongolia. So very different, from the Contemporary Arts Museum. And even though she had studied in the US and was interested in contemporary art and introducing contemporary art, she was at that stage, is at that stage, that they're trying to look at contemporary art in Mongolia. The distance, the conceptual distance was so different from what I had imagined that we could somehow cook something up together. Because as a regional museum in Jacksonville, we always say we bring the Jacksonville to the world and the world to Jacksonville. So I'm always eager to find points of connection. Also, I'm an international person myself. But so that was really great difficulty there to try and build something via Zoom. We had thought that we could meet in London because she was going to attend a Courtauld, but that, of course, the travel ban. And then just simply something so simple as the hour, like she had to stay up until 1 a.m. and I had to get up really early. So those were the difficulties, but we managed to create something together. So
yeah, just like Ilva said, I think that while I suppose the connection through the internet does bridge spaces, the time gap is really something else altogether that also needs to be addressed. Because I was paired with Anastasia James of the Beckler Art Museum, and we had a 12-hour difference, and we both worked full-time jobs in museums with regular hours. So it was quite challenging getting a good schedule between the two of us, because she would be at work and then I would have to be up late at night. So I guess in terms of communication, that was also another challenge that we had to face. But I guess going back to the question of DS, right, of what was missing, I suppose it would have been the opportunity to also observe how certain programs are conducted, perhaps in your partner's institution, because what we found during our discussions between Anastasia and myself was that we actually had a lot of parallels working for private museums, even though my field, again, is quite different from hers. My interest is in tradeware ceramics and more historical, whereas she works in contemporary art and modern art. But we found that there were a lot of shared interests in digital collaboration and in educational programs and in outreach. But sometimes there are aspects that you pick up through observation when you get to be in a space with another person and witness how the programs are executed, as opposed to outright talking about it or presenting it. So I think maybe that's something that's sort of lost in the experience of being purely a digital collaboration.
I think that just, Amelie, to follow on what you were saying, it occurs to me now that we spoke very little about art objects, and really entirely about sort of matters that were more personal or that had to do with our practice, but it was interesting to be relating to a colleague in the arts without the art being at the forefront of the conversation.
Yeah, we really discussed that during some of the, pre-planning sessions. So I think we should just really bring it into the space now. We may not have had a chance to talk about or see directly the programs. That kind of like you're saying, there was a little more interpersonal exchange with the international exchange. So, I like friends around to just share a little bit how the program gave us a chance to cross both interpersonal borders and international borders. And, we want to encourage everyone watching to submit some questions. And just for clarification, there was a US liaison paired with an international colleague for this program. And that's how it has historically been set up as well. So how'd you get kind of warm and fuzzy with people as opposed to talking about archives and acquisitions?
Yeah, maybe. Okay, I'll do. I mean, I had it quite easy in the sense that me and Melissa have a friend in common. So there was like sort of a shared experience where we had seen each other in person and recognized that in the first meeting without knowing it before. So I think first we had that, which was really wonderful, but also it kind of, I think, made us realize for a step that it's not completely anonymous, because I think one of these wonderful things about this exchange is that you're from two different parts of the world, and it's like you're both part of the same ecosystem of the art world, which sometimes feels so small but also is so vast internationally. And I loved how you described it a little bit as a letter of friendship or a writing buddy, where you could kind of share a lot of the problems that you might have in the art world or some of the challenges. And it's almost like your art therapy, where you can vent to somebody outside of your realm. And I think we very quickly established that we just use it as this very wonderful space of intimacy, because it was so far away and from my own living room, where we could just share away and gossip away and talk very candidly about something like funding and fees and all the things people don't want to talk about. And I think that's one of the strengths of this program in that sense. I don't know how it was for.
I completely agree. I think that when Diaz and I first started talking, we first really explored or explained to each other what our practices were about, and very quickly got into kind of the nitty-gritty of, trying to break into collaboration, or trying to break into the circle, or trying to get through the front door, climb down the chimney, or whatever. And then that became a good couple of conversations that we had. And as Diaz said as well, we also decided to utilize social media. So we weren't just meeting once a month on Zoom. We were following each other, and we were, if something happened, we were cheerfully applauding for the other person. And that helped to bring the personal into it as well, because you then found yourself following somebody's journey and they were following yours, and it helped to kind of break the ice, because we didn't know each other from the get-go, and we were two very different countries with two very different lived experiences. But it wasn't, I think it was just a mutual thing where we decided we weren't just going to do it once a month or on whatever. We definitely utilize social media, and I think that definitely helped to make a difference, because you could see what the other individual was trying to accomplish or trying to do, and you could then become almost like a cheerleader. And in becoming that cheerleader, you were then allowed to go on a completely different journey with them, which was really lovely. So that by the time it came around to having to work out, okay, well, now we've got to put something together, we were then so comfortable with each other that it was literally like just a follow-on conversation. So I don't know if anybody else has that that they were going through, or if it was completely different.
Well, I just want to add, Kat, I was really thankful to be paired with you, just because we came in different points of the diaspora, so, I was hoping to be connected with an international colleague who was representative of the diaspora. We know typically what the art world is made of. So, when I got that letter and I Googled you really quick, I was like, oh, this is going to be great. And, I even think about how we both talked about our experiences working within institutions in relation to our identity, but also just learning that like Black History Month is different in the UK as opposed to here in the US.
Yeah, we're in October.
Yeah, so things like that, and even us talking about how we can really increase Black history as a year-long and a global celebration. So those like small cultural exchanges, kind of really referring back to Ariel's example of the pen pal, it really was kind of near and dear, and also just to have another supporter for your practice, because curators are servants. At least in my practice, I truly believe that we are here to serve artists and ensure artists are successful, and really be the mediators between institutions and artists. And that can be a lonely road, because who's cheerleading us or who's supporting us? And a lot of times the field, although you may exchange with different institutions, especially in my case as a founder of a small arts organization, there could be a lot of blockages or roads that are not available in a traditional sense. So, to have you, Kat, across the pond, as I would say, or, some other slang words and cultural euphemisms that you taught me, it was really a great experience, and, allowed to really support my confidence as a practitioner.
I think it's interesting to me, DS, what you just said about the curator being a servant, because I think I would agree with that, but it wouldn't have occurred to me immediately to say that I was serving the artist. I feel like, that I remember my first job in a museum being told by my boss, who was a more senior curator, a curator is like a courtier. And that sort of that's something that I talked quite a lot to, that came up in my conversations in the EPIC program too, was this sort of way that the ways in which our relationship to our institutions were maybe being not necessarily transformed as much as we might like by the pandemic, but certainly this was causing us to rethink them. And I guess that's one of the directions that our conversations went in a lot. And part of it was just the intimacy of the fact that both of us were at home, and it sort of took away a little bit of the pretense of being in this very how we were supposed to behave professionally, because there was no getting around the fact that our professional lives were disrupted. So why pretend that it was business as usual?
Yeah, no, totally.
Go ahead, Eric, Amelie.
No, I just want to add to that as well, where me and Melissa, we had both worked with artist estates a lot, and I think that's something that came up a lot with us, was sort of this working with objects that might not have been sort of important in the moment, how they come and go, and sort of how do we navigate that long term as a curator, to think about not this moment but the future, because we know with so many archives that are now existing, the incredible voids that we have in them in terms of gender, in terms of LGBTQ, in terms of minorities, and how completely biased the materials that we can currently work with, and how do we sort of navigate that. And it was one of the most, I think, interesting points me and Melissa had to exchange, how that's handled in Europe, specifically Germany, Italy, and in the US, and financing that, public funding for that, private funding, all the things that have been destroyed. Of now, finally we have so many, or we start to have some people of color in museums, and so much of material that we would now kill to have is completely gone. And it's I think, sort of that was one of the best moments we had in our conversation.
I think I'd like to follow up by just saying to Diaz as well, thanks, because most of the time I feel like I have to defend my practice myself, because I do not work with objects, I work with people. I do not consider myself to be a storyteller, I consider myself to be a story catcher. And so I'm then trained to figure out how to disseminate those stories, some of them really horrible and traumatic, in such a way that the general audience then understands them. So it was really heartwarming to be able to speak to someone who didn't know my practice, didn't know me, but could understand that I don't necessarily work with objects. I tend to work with stories and people, and then work out through that what international artists I'm going to work with to create an exhibition. One of the best things I think that came out of the EPIC program for me was last year when I curated Harbinger, which was in coincided with COP26. And to my everlasting surprise, I saw DS pimping me everywhere and the exhibition everywhere. And because it was a hybrid exhibition, when we started to kind of break down the numbers and look at it, not only did we have, you know, people from East Asia, but there were so many people from like Pittsburgh and the States. And I was like, right, okay. So again, it was, yeah, I'm so grateful for you, DS. You have no idea. I'm so grateful for the AAMC for putting us together as well, because you go into these things, you never quite know what you're going to get or the person you're going to be with. And I keep telling people, you know, go for the program because you don't know. And I just feel that we seriously lucked out. So thanks, AAMC.
Now, Ilvia, did you say?
No, I was just thinking what came out the other day, which was that in a way this experience with the pandemic, that it forced us all to turn to the digital, and that in the case of Kat and DS, made you realize how that your reach could be so much further through hybrid experiences, no, that you hadn't thought of previously. Isn't that true?
Oh, definitely. You know, when I saw you did the exhibition and how it was a hybrid opportunity for engagement, both in person during a large conference and on the internet, you know, we at Boom Concepts kind of had a similar scaled opportunity, or a smaller scaled opportunity rather, where it was like a hyper localized conference. We were asked to put together and curate an exhibition and utilize a new platform for conference attendees to visit the exhibition online. You know, you would create an avatar and all of these things. And I probably would not have given it a second look or a second chance if I hadn't been in coordination and conversation with you, you know, looking at the exhibition, seeing how your exhibition was displayed online. So, you know, we did do a similar opportunity for patrons and artists, but at a hyper localized level. So, you know, and that's what I wanted to ask first to all folks here is, you know, what were some of the things, you know, whether you learned from AMC directly by attending the conference, from your partnership with your liaison, you know, what were some of the things that you brought back into your personal practice or back to your institution? You know, was there a digital strategy? You know, was there something that you learned from a colleague? Was there, you know, was there something that made you more confident to maybe demand more pay from a conversation or from a lesson learned? But yeah, what did you take back, whether it was from AMC or independent colleague, from your experience into the institution?
Okay, for me, I was waiting to see if anybody else is going to jump in. I think that I've always worked collaboratively. My projects are big, bold, in your face, so I tend to work collaboratively with people on an international basis. I also work a lot with doctors and scientists because I like to know the kind of nitty-gritty of everything, and I think if I want to know, then the general audience wants to know. However, what I took from this program and continue to take from this program, actually, DS, is your approach to larger institutions. You know, you don't go in and you're not timid about saying what you can do and how you can do it. And that really inspired me because, as I said, institutions in Scotland don't they say they want change, you know, but yet they will not particularly work with a freelancer like myself because they consider that my work is too political, too exotic, too whatever. I don't know. But yet it was quite funny when I could see like 4 or 5 of them constantly coming into my last exhibition. I was like, listen, people, if I see this being like copied anywhere, it's not going to go well. But what I got from you was just that fire, that, you know, that determination of I am here and I've got something that you can't do. So you're going to work with me so that we can do it together. And that's something that I've taken on board. And actually it does work, because now in November, I'll be doing a collaborative undertaken with the curator for University of Dundee. So I just want to say thanks for that. Might be the last one I'll be doing because we might fight, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I think I really sort of mirror that in terms of you saying with freelancing. I think in Europe it's quite different because at least sort of in Italy, Germany, there's such a large off-scene space. So there's a lot of things going on outside of institutions. It's very much, I think, one of the biggest part of our art worlds, yet it's constantly precarious. So I think there's this very strange thing where everybody's currently talking about a culture of care, and there's a lot of collaborative effort. I'm part of a collective, yet there's also, you know, through precarity, there's always a lot of competition. And I think that's one of the main things that constantly happen in the art world. And sort of Melissa and I had this really wonderful, honest and generous exchange where early on we started sending each other funding things that work maybe internationally or that work particularly for international projects, depending on where you are, but also in the context for the other. She sent me some things in the US and I sent her some American funding that's, you know, utilizable in Europe, things like that. And I think, of course, there's so many research or websites that we know that have, you know, a lot of these postings, but it's quite rare when you have somebody really share things that are tailored towards you, and to really think about how we can be more supportive of each other in terms of resources too, which is such an uncomfortable conversation to have so often. And I think because she has been a freelancer for most of her career for a long time, she's incredibly good at asking for things up front, especially in the institutional setting, which for me is sometimes very difficult coming into that and coming from a different cultural background, and realizing that in the US it's a very sort of head-on conversation to have, apparently, especially from freelancing within institutional work and contract basis and things like that. It's been incredibly beneficial for me to see how she does that and how to ask for things, which sounds so simple, but I do think that there's always this underlying tone in the art world of, you know, we should all be happy to be in it because it's so wonderful, but it is also extremely hard work. I mean, everybody knows that in the audience and in the room. So I think it was really nice to have honest conversations about that.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I guess that, yeah, I'm really grateful actually to AAMC for the opportunity that was given, and not just for being able to talk about the practice with Anastasia, my US liaison, but I think the conference was also very helpful for me. Actually, when I had applied for the EPIC program, I think I had just been appointed a newly appointed associate curator at the museum a year before. So I think that there was a lot actually that I was able to take away from the conference. I couldn't probably list it right now, but I thought it was very interesting. And I especially thought that there were a lot of good discussions with the small breakout groups. And yeah, I think that's something definitely I'll take away from the whole experience. And it's definitely worth encouraging other practitioners from, I guess, the Philippines, like myself, who'd be interested in learning from international colleagues.
I'm just giving people space. Ariel, Ilva, would you like to kind of share anything in this area? what you took away, what you brought back to the institution. Tintin, I also wanted to give a little space. I remember during our planning conversations, you had talked about a digital project between Asian communities you were working on, and I thought that was really interesting. Maybe you could share a little bit about that in this space.
Oh yeah, I think that conversation came up when we were talking about some of the challenges that Anastasia and I faced because of, again, the time gap between us, right? Because I had also the opportunity to participate in another purely digital collaboration with fellow curators from within Asia, from Indonesia, Singapore, and Japan. And it was a program focused on trying to address the issues around textiles, the textile traditions in Asia. And that was a purely digital collaboration over, I think, 4 months. We were talking about issues tied into the complexity of Asian textiles, whether contemporary art practice, or whether it was from the point of view of like museum objects, which I also work with actually at Ayala Museum. So yeah, that was another interesting, I guess, project. And the advantage there was that while there were also time differences between all of us Asian curators collaborating, I guess it wasn't nothing as drastic as 12 hours came between us. So I think it felt a lot easier for us to find a good time to discuss our thoughts, what were the issues that we wanted to be able to include in the project. And that was a purely online project on Instagram that we mounted. Over I think, it was a weekly posting over 2 weeks. No, it was every Monday, Wednesday, Friday over 2 months. Sorry, there you go.
Got you. Thank you for sharing. Ariel, Ilva.
Well, I was. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Ariel. Go ahead.
Well, I'm afraid I was going to take things maybe in a slightly different direction, and just wanted to introduce also a subject that came up quite a lot in my conversations with Tara, which was the sort of thoughts about the sustainability of our practices, and and what I think has been, well, for myself at least, a sort of a reckoning with my own thoughts about the way that I live and the way that I work, and the consequences, for the planet of some of the choices that I make, that I think was really that some of these thoughts were made to feel more urgent, certainly in the last couple of years. And Amelie, when we were speaking the other day, and you mentioned that the Biennale was opening, and I was reminded of images of dolphins having returned to the canals of Venice, and yet, it seems that not only are we kind of, are things sort of back to business as usual, but maybe in a kind of accelerated way, because we're trying to make up for lost time. This is something also that we mentioned when we were speaking earlier as a group, and so I think that just became a sort of this was certainly a recurring theme in the conversations that I had, was the what does it mean to be a curator, and in the case of both Tara and I, with these sort of institutional affiliations, at a time of crisis.
Yeah, I mean, I hope increased global empathy is something that we take away back to our institutions and our partnerships and our personal practice, from these exchanges with these brilliant people. So, not a change in direction at all, brother.
I have to say, being here right now, it's quite interesting because, of course, today's the second day, it's a preview. So by now everybody has power walked through it. And it is really hard after 2 years of having these more focused online conversations to now, do the whole wave and smile and everybody pretends to know everybody, and we all realize that we have so little to say of substance. And I think obviously this is not completely true, and it's also wonderful to see people in person, but it is almost a culture shock to see the extreme that such mega events in the art has become, and that, especially as somebody who's in Venice outside of Biennale, there was this whole moment where everybody said, the pandemic is going to change the way we operate, and it won't go back to this, and we will all be so conscious of this. And the opposite, I would say, almost happened. It feels like now it's more is more instead of less is less. And I think it was quite harsh to see that, because I really did think that there would be some different ways, some different approaches. And even me and Melissa had that, for example, where I'm teaching at a university with architecture students, and I have a lecture series on repair, and she would just pop in one night and she would have an amazing conversations for students in Austria on question representation in the US, and that could happen online. There's no need for her to fly over and do that. And I think we saw that, of course, there's so many limitations to online formats, but it is also really much possible to have, meaningful exchange through these things. And I think that has really made a difference in our world at all. Now that we're open again, I don't see a change, and it's quite disheartening, I have to say, in a way.
Yeah, although there is a lot of talk about it and how can we change it, I don't know how we solve it. I'm old school. I think one has to live art in person, and one has to meet an artist in person and allow, with a glass of wine, for ideas to flow and conversations to flow. So I think we talked a little bit about what stages, where's Zoom good, and where do we feel that we're missing something. And it is, where I miss it is that it's that space where ideas and projects are born, in an easy way. So that was the issue with Tuka in Mongolia and myself, no? What came in, to answer your question that we had earlier, what came out of our collaboration, for me, what was fascinating was the idea of the Sana Sabar Museum trying to redefine the history of art in Mongolia, which is, of course, traditional arts and crafts. And the young contemporary artists still using these same arts and crafts, but in a contemporary way. And what always happens, that you break tradition, and that has its good side and its bad side, and its detractors and its supporters. And how do you incorporate that into a traditional museum? But what was most interesting is that, as you all know, we then have organize a symposium. No, each of us organize with our partner organizes a symposium. So we did ours on how do you incorporate contemporary artists into a traditional setting, say contemporary Native American artists into a traditional museum that has Native American art. But what was most interesting to me was that the conversation then led to what we all are dealing with right now in institutions, which is how to recontextualize the art that we have, and to change the language. And how do you do that? How far do you go? Whose voice do you incorporate, and so on, and the difficulties in those choices. And it became a really a live conversation from all participants. So that's what I best took away from this experience, even though I should finish by saying I thought the conference was lovely, and the focus of it was, I really enjoyed the talks.
If I might be so bold as to disagree with the first part of what you said. So, for instance, the work that you can see behind me is by an artist called Hannah Titzler. She's in Portugal. I met her digitally. I've just done work with the Horniman Museum in South London, where I created an entire bit of them for hair discrimination for their hair show. It was all done digitally. They approached me online. We set up a meeting. We had a conversation. I knew exactly what they wanted, and I then designed the full concept around it. I brought in the artists around it, which was all done digitally. Yes, it's very well to say that old school is good. Of course, it's always good to meet someone and have a glass of wine and whatever. But I think that if institutions are truly looking at the environment and they're truly looking at changing, there has to be ways and means that you can cut down the footfall. You do not necessarily need to get on a plane to go from point A to B. If you can do the same meeting digitally. For the last 2 exhibitions that I've done, every single artist I approached on social media. I had conversations with them. I told them what it was that I was looking to do. I was really lucky because they all said yes. And then we had lots of Zoom meetings to follow up, and they created the work. In the case of one of them, Leonor Anthony, she then shipped the work, but some of them just sent images online, and then we printed it here in Glasgow. So there are ways and means. And I think that this is one of the things about working with institutions, working with freelancers. There are ways and means that freelancers do certain things that maybe the institutions and museums and art galleries can have conversations with and bring people in to help them figure out different ways of doing different things, other than just going back to the same playbook.
Well, I'm gonna smash these 2 points together because, here in Pittsburgh, where my organization is working on a hyper localized level, we are excited about the opportunity to send our practitioners out. Or for a lot of times that field building is necessary because it may be their first time going somewhere or working with an institution. So, AAMC and a lot of other organizations have shifted from an entirely in-person experience or an exchange to an entirely digital exchange, in the future. And maybe for folks who might be interested, and, we do have AAMC here, how do organizations and institutions and curators, as the practitioners of the field, kind of make sure a hybrid option is available moving forward? So it's like, what's the work that we have to do? What is the work that institutions have to do? What does next year's program look like? Is there a hybrid option? Are people going to converge in New York? I see that the AMC is having their conference or meetup in New York in person. There's also a digital option. So, it will be interesting for folks to share kind of maybe their experiences, their wishes about an accessible hybrid digital time traveling Back to the Future something world, or maybe just stand on it and say, hey, we want all digital. This is the future. Thought, reaction.
Well, so it makes me think a little bit as well about the way that the art travels, not just the people. And I think I had this idea some years ago, I mean, not so long ago, that I want that the work that I was going to be really committed to was trying to sort of devise a greener way to ship art, and to see to it that we were more responsible as institutions when it came to the preservation of the planet, and not only the works of art that we hold. But I wonder more and more whether the answer isn't more like keeping it in the ground, and maybe in the case of art that means keeping it out of the box altogether, and that it never it makes me think of community and looking to the artists next door, and the way that if that conversation can't be had without getting on a plane, then maybe it means you look to the conversation that you can have by walking down the street. And I guess that it's sort of I don't know, it's the kind of dawning in my mind of a little bit of a kind of an anti-global perspective, which is a little bit surprising to me, because it seems at odds with a lot of what I thought of as being the reason that I got into this business in the first place, which was that I wanted to be sort of a citizen of the world. But I don't know about that anymore.
I have to say, Collective Rewilding, we wrote a text for Proto Cinema, which is a Istanbul, New York kind of art space, and with Abidjan Toto was a curator, and they had a few many places, and it was an exhibition that had a common concept, and then took space in a number of off spaces around the world. And so nobody traveled, there was none of that, but it was sort of a shared thing to think about: how can we have local communities think about the same planetary concerns that are so globally urgent, and yet not participate in this attention economy. And it was this wonderful thing where really they had so many different off spaces and small things happening, yet got a lot of attention because it was almost a global project in a sense. And I think it was an incredible project that is a really new model to think about international art engagement without sort of the downfalls of it.
If I could jump in, I thought it was interesting that Emily had said maybe a few points ago that it seemed that the art world had sort of just jumped back into business as usual. But I suppose, because living in the Philippines, it seems that the paradigm here is still a little different. Like we're still very much half in lockdown, I guess, although technically we've opened up quite a lot. Comparatively speaking to a few months ago, but really the way that people move on the street is quite different, because like, for example, the museum I work for is located right in the business district of the capital, but there's notably quite fewer people everywhere, even in the malls, in the museum. We're starting to see families come back, but really we've had to rethink our programming. So maybe it's not so much that it's business as usual in general, I guess. I know that a lot of museums in the Philippines are still, working to promote our content through other means. We have moved a lot of programs online. So I don't discount really the value of purely digital programs and collaborations. But I also agree with what Ilva had said. There's something also about being able to witness something in person. Like we just had a meeting earlier this day, actually, where we had to review some of the textiles for an upcoming exhibition we're working on. And it was really quite different trying to assess how the entire exhibition would look just based on video calls and images, as opposed to having our guest curator in person available in the gallery to really get a sense of the space. So I guess hybrid is really one of the most viable steps moving forward. And I think that, for our museum, the Ayala Museum, that's really one of the directions we're trying to take moving forward, because we're also trying to be a bit more conscious about, I guess, all of the possibilities that really the online can provide, that a lot of people don't, even within the Philippines, they don't necessarily have access to our museum physically. I just wanted to jump that.
Yeah, no, that's great. And with that, I'm gonna say hybrid is not only the future, it's now. I wish we all would have had an opportunity to meet in person, but I'm thankful we had this time together. And I'm gonna pass it over to AAMC. Good job, everyone.
Thank you.
Lormar, are you there on the ones and twos?
Hi, DS. You have 15 minutes if you want to keep it going.
Oh, we got 15 minutes. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, we're going to 11:15.
Time is a little off. So maybe let's take some questions because we've been rambling for a while. So maybe get some feedback and questions from folks. No question answered. I'm going to look through. No question missed. No one wants to ask anything spicy. No one wants to know any art world secrets. This is the time to ask those questions because we probably have them. Let's check back. Let's see if that was, oh, there we go. That was enough bait. Okay. All right. Amazing conversation. My question is, do you feel pressure to show work from outside your communities? Do you feel pressure to show work from outside your communities? I think you can interpret that culturally, internationally, recognized and unrecognized borders, but do you feel pressure to show work from outside of your community?
I don't particularly, because I am usually telling stories of marginalized communities and women of color. That's what I focus on. So for me, I don't. What I try to do, however, as I said before, is I tend to work very collaboratively, and I tend to always try to blend science and art. So what I try to do is speak to artists that I know that are also activists, but come from within the diaspora. So that means that they're not necessarily based here in Glasgow. For instance, currently at Venice Biennale, we in Britain, and Scotland, we're for the first time ever being represented by two women of color. This is a big deal. It's a historic moment in time. Sonia Boyce is representing the British Pavilion, and Alberta Whittle is representing Scotland and Venice partnership, which I'm very proud of, and her work is amazing. And so when I am putting together exhibitions collaboratively, I'm not only looking at people that I know or people within my instant community. I am looking at people who can bring a wider flavor to the exhibition. So for me, there's no, maybe I tend to put pressure on myself, but from the people who come to my exhibitions, there's no pressure for me to show people who are outside. But then again, I am freelance, so I tend to do mostly, unless I'm working with an institution, I tend to do whatever I want.
Yeah, and I would add, I feel pressure to kind of support and uplift. Oh, well, I don't want to view it as pressure. It's more of a responsibility, right? So I have a responsibility to showcase and support artists who may not be the same identity as me. So, Kat, like if I was supporting Kat's work, that is work that's outside of my community based on our different relationship to the African diaspora. So just like, it's really about identifying who and what is in your community. Hopefully, typically all of us live in community with people who are similarly valued, similarly cultured, same religion, so like through Boom Concepts, I am like a married, straight, cis man, Black man, American born. So, in our efforts and, goals of supporting Black, brown, queer, and femme artists, I'm not a woman or a femme. So, that's not necessarily somebody outside of my community. but that is someone that's outside of my lived experience and outside of my personal identity. So, I am not necessarily a part of the feminine community or the woman community or a community of women. I know that is a sacred space in a lot of spaces in my culture, in my neighborhood, in my community. But I do see it as a responsibility to support women in our practice at Boom Concepts and in my personal practice. So, like, I feel funny about pressure because that's like close to oppression, but like I view it as a responsibility, and that's tied to me viewing Curator as a service to artists.
Yeah, I'm glad you changed it, because I found it curious that you said pressure. In fact, the pressure is actually usually the opposite. So I find it incredibly important. Jacksonville is one of the foremost ports of immigration into the United States. Most people don't know that. They think of Miami and South America, but Jacksonville actually has from all over. So for me, it's really important to represent the whole community, the greater community, and to familiarize other communities of the greater community with the different communities. So in that sense, it's something that is absolutely vital to me when I look at the exhibitions program. And that goes not only for nationalities or cultures, but of course also the African American community and the LGBTQ community and so on. It's more important than ever, I feel, because museums are a unique space where people dare, or I shouldn't say dare, where people feel that they can actually have a conversation without accusing each other of being the other. At least that's the space that we try to create in the museum.
Yeah.
That's one of the issues I have a little bit was a term community, because I think it has been so inflated, and I think often these identity politics are then used to focus on the differences. And so I love how DS, when you talk about you're a space that you try to make space for people of all color and sexual orientation and men and women and everybody on the spectrum of non-binary. And I think quite often a lot of the community politics, where, for example, in the city of Venice, where I'm obviously not Italian, so I am a definite outsider to this community, yet a lot of my work is concerned with the absolute lack of representation of any Venetian artist within the Biennale, because this is sort of the backdrop to international blue chip galleries and the top curators. So it's quite interesting when you always have, I always acknowledge what spaces I can take and who I can talk for, and what spaces I shouldn't take, in that sense of community, but who I can still support without trying to take space that shouldn't be mine. And I think that has become such a difficult field to navigate, but that should also have a lot of more generosity in how we allow people to navigate it, because the moment that you try to do the work, I think that's already something amazing. And how you say, I can't really speak for femme artists, yet I'm trying to give them space and uplift it. And I think that's already something that's so incredible. And how can we almost dismantle this idea of very separate communities, instead of, because everybody has so many different layers of different communities we belong to through sexual orientation or family life or religion. So maybe that's my idea of community, that I think that focus on identity politics within community outreach in museums has become almost a fetishized idea of the local and the non-museum goer. And I think I would rather problematize that, honestly.
Well, and I would add to that. So I work at a single artist museum, and so I have probably fewer opportunities than the rest of you to work with living artists, but not. I mean, I do have some, and but I'm also very mindful of the of the institution and the opportunities and I think responsibility that I have there to change the face of the institution, that it has evolved more in the 25 years of the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum than our collection has, and so I think that it's that a lot of my efforts are directed in that way, sort of changing the that it. I would like it very much if the next the curator that replaces me looks nothing like me, and that would be that's sort of where that's where I feel like there's the most work to be done. Which is not to say that we also don't. We also have a lot of these questions arise when it comes to programming of other artists at the museum, and whether or not I think of there being kind of there are two ways I think that an institution can be sort of parochial, and one is to be focused exclusively on their on the artists that are our neighbors, and the other is to look only to other to centers of the art world, and think that anything that comes that it's got to come from New York or London to be worth our attention. And I'd like to sort of fall into neither one of those traps.
And I kind of want to ask and give folks a chance to share, are there any new international partnerships or new news for you and your personal practice or your role in your institution to share with our folks? Because now we're coming up. Sorry for that. Sorry for that early alert. But I want to give space for people to share. I'll share. Kat and I are in conversation to continue some of our agitation and rabble rousing. We'll be planning a conversation with the Carnegie Museum of Art, talking about histories and when you find yourself within a museum archive. Pittsburgh is home to one of the largest visual archives of African-American history through the Teenie Harris photograph archive. So we'll be rabble rousing, and Pittsburgh and Glasgow are sister cities. So we're also trying to figure out how to make some exchanges there. So we're continuing our international exchange through our partnership. And I want to just give it off to some other folks to share new news or anything as we end out.
I mean, maybe I can just add very quickly that the travel ban has been lifted. So I'll be actually in New York at the AMC conference. It comes up in May, and I'll be leading a panel on tourism. As once again, I'm very biased about the problems and benefits within art tourism and travel, and what that does to local communities and the sense of spectatorship. And so I hope that all of the people who are listening today will be at the conference, hopefully in person or online. And I would absolutely love to have more conversations in person or online with them.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, actually, I unfortunately I won't be able to join the in-person conference, but I'm looking forward to your presentation, Emily. I signed up for the digital version. I hope that I can sit in for that. And I guess, well, we have a lot coming up for our museum actually in the coming months. We're working on 3 exhibitions. So hopefully we'll be able to come out with the announcements soon.
Ariel, Ilva, any announcements, or you just want to wave goodbye before we pass it off?
Well, we're working on a new building, so that should that's been slightly set back by the pandemic, but we're going to break ground soon, and so hopefully you can all come join us in Santa Fe around 2025 for the opening of the new Georgia O'Keeffe Museum.
that sounds exciting. Let's see. Well, the biggest show I have first coming up May 20, which is what I will dive into when I go back home, is a karaoke show actually, which I'm very excited about. Yay! And it's the first one in the city, so I'm really excited.
And
I
we're
don't
at
have anything to say. I was going to say what you said, and then you said it, so I'm done.
and now we will pass it over to Glormar, who has been our AAMC magician behind the scenes, pulling us all together and making sure this happens magically.
Well, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Glorimar Garcia, Program Manager for AMC and AMC Foundation. Really big thank you to everyone for joining today's program and to all of our speakers, DS, Amelie, Ariel, Kat, Marinela, and Ilva. We're grateful for your time and generosity and sharing your experience with us today. All of you can stay updated on all things AAMC by joining our mailing list using the link in the chat. And we hope you will join us again soon for another webinar. Thank you again.